Hello, everybody. We all set, Dan? Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 26th Annual Waltham Land Trust Annual Meeting. I think 26, let me look at the paper. 26th Annual Meeting of the Waltham Land Trust. So welcome. I'll pause here for applause. 26 years is a pretty decent number. I think it is a big deal. It's past the silver anniversary. Hello, everybody. My name is Nadine Stein. I'm the president of the board, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. Maybe if you have questions for board or staff, Kathy or Sonia later, you can find us with a blue name tag, but maybe board members can kind of wave, or everybody can turn around and see who they might be if you have any questions for us. We'd be happy to answer any questions over ice cream later. And it doesn't matter that it's cold outside, it's always a good time for ice cream. Also like to point out that we have an elected official here in the audience. Councilor LeBlanc is here, so thank you for coming tonight, Councilor. We always find it really important to have decent, positive relationships with our city council because we have to work together to continue with our mission of preserving open space. And more people are coming in, this is awesome. Yes. Oh, look who's here, Mayor McCarthy. Welcome, Mayor McCarthy. Thanks for coming. She has that big coat on. Thought she could sneak in here without anybody noticing who she was. No such luck. No such luck. Sonia, I'm going to have Sonia come in. She's checking some people in. But before I do that, I do also want to point out 25 years is a long time. We just said it's a silver anniversary. We have two founding board members here tonight who are celebrating their silver anniversary here at the Land Trust. So Mark, can you stand up and wave to everybody? Mark Rudnick and Marie Daly. Hi, Marie. Thank you. Those are the people you can congratulate in person over the ice cream. So Sonia is going to, are you coming up?
Actually, you can advance. I think there's another slide.
Is there another slide?
Yeah.
Welcome.
There you are.
All right, so here is the agenda for our meeting tonight, and you also find it in your program. We do have Environmentalist of the Year Award tonight. We have a speaker. We have an update on the Mass Central Rail Trail that people are always interested in hearing about. And then because we count this as our November board meeting, we will have a little bit of business, so we'll talk about our financials. And then we will elect and or re-elect board members. We'll do that toward the end of the meeting. Now, though, I would like to introduce our awesome executive director, Sonia Wadman. Come on up, Sonia. For Sonia, we don't have to prompt applause. She just gets it.
Aw.
Oops.
That's okay. All right. Great. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I'm so excited to see all of you here. This is a really good turnout. It's kind of chilly, but you guys brave the cold because that's what we do as outdoors people. We don't mind a little cold weather. No such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. Excellent. And bathrooms are around the corner in case you need to check those out. And we're just going to dive right into our highlights, but I do just want to mention a couple of upcoming events. I have some of these sheets here over on the table with our upcoming events, which of course includes Giving Tuesday in a week, or 2 weeks rather, and then we have a fundraiser at Bistro 781 on December 10th. We're going to be doing a hike around Beaverbrook North with Debbie Von Reckenberg. There she is, yay, Debbie! And Moritz as well, her fabulous husband. Awesome, thank you, and that's going to be great. That's on December 13th, and then of course we have our New Year's Day hike on New Year's Day. All right, so from the past year, well, speaking of which, this was our New Year's Day hikes last year. On this side are the team that left from the Craft Food Hall. So there was like almost 100, and this side over here is from the South Gate. We had like about 125 people in total, so there's probably like 70 or whatnot. Great time, good time. Definitely everybody should go to that event if you haven't ever done it before, because it's amazing. It's a very popular event. Then in February, we had a party to celebrate our fabulous volunteer stewards. Who's a volunteer steward? I see several of, wow, look at this, the steward side right here. So we love our stewards, and we celebrated a great season at Mighty Squirrel. And then in February, we had Matt Gabriel from the Animal Experience. That was really fun. It's a very popular event with kids. This was a highlight. Our duck walk was supposed to be in February. We had to postpone it twice because it was so cold and there was ice like this thick along the river. So it was rough. So it was a big highlight. It was exciting. We finally got it done in March. And look at, there's someone with a baby. That was great. That was a huge highlight. And then we, of course, had our Earth Day cleanup, and that's Phil Moser, who's here in the audience, who freed a chair from the river with Emily Sipek's help, I'm sure. Next. Oh, wait. Oops, one more time. Yay! Then we had our Green Space Blues Jam in May at the Payne Estate. We're so happy to go back to that spot. It's just so beautiful. That's our biggest fundraiser of the year, and we do hope to go back there this year, and we're in 2026. Big exciting things happened in July. This is about our advocacy work that we did as part of Save Waltham Wildlife. And in May, myself and the president of the Brandeis Students for Environmental Action met with the grounds crew and talked to them about how they should really be moving away from rodenticide poison. So we had a really great letter that outlined all of our points, including the fact that Bentley University doesn't use rodenticides. So we were like, you guys should really make the change. And then lo and behold, on July 1st, they emailed me and said they were doing that. Wow, so this was a huge highlight. This was really exciting for us. Great, great, great stuff. And then later in the month, the Save Waltham Wildlife team went to the lobby day at the State House, which was really cool. See all those folks? There was like 300 and something advocates from the Cape to the Berkshires, all sorts of save fill-in-the-blank wildlife groups where they're meeting with legislators and convincing them to we want them to pass a statewide ban on rodenticides. That was the purpose of this lobby day. Then also in July, we had a lot of activities at Wellington Fields. Actually, we have activity at Wellington Fields throughout the year, right? I'm Brayton Chris and other Wellington, Bob, other people who, and Eric, others who help out at Wellington. So this is a picture from a work party. And then on that side over there, we had a really cool lemonade social. And Senator Barrett came to that, and that was fun. Then we had a really cool experience back at the Payne Estate forest bathing with Nadine Mazula. She's the woman in orange over there. And that was super cool. I know some people here were at that event. This is more great stuff from Save Waltham Wildlife. Our folks developed a pledge to encourage students to recognize the role that they play in rodent control and the need for pest control. So we developed a pledge that we urged them to sign saying, I got this, I will properly dispose of my trash, I will report if there's an overflowing dumpster, blah, blah, blah. So that was really cool that we are getting a lot of students to sign those pledges. And those were the students from this environmental action group. So here we had our party at Hardy with Senator Barrett, and this was to celebrate our land purchase. This was another major highlight of the year, was being able to buy land next to the parcels that we already had. And this is on Lakeview Avenue, right abutting the lake, the pond, as you can see. And we were able to buy these lands thanks to a grant that Senator Barrett secured for us through the budget of the year before, and also through an anonymous donation. So we're really, really grateful for those grants and donations, and that we were able to buy this land. So we are expanding our empire, and I'm very excited about that. So we had a fun event there in September. And then this was really fun. This was in October, of course, when we had our 5K. And this is the first year that we had our 50-yard monster dash. So over there on the right, of course, are the kids 10 and under who did a quick little run at the beginning. And then these are some folks who were dressed up, taking to the course. And as someone who also likes to dress up in costume, I would like to see more people in costume at the event. It's fun, people, come on. I know we're all adults, but it's fun to dress up. Whew. Okay, so now we are going to talk about our Environmentalists of the Year. So Inge Euler was one of the founding directors of the Waltham Land Trust. She was an amazing, amazing woman. She actually was the first land trust person that I met when I signed up to be a volunteer 16 years ago, before I started working for the land trust. I was just a volunteer, and Inge was the person who oriented me at the farmer's market, and I was like, what a fabulous woman. Sadly, she passed away last April, 2 Aprils ago, but because she's so awesome, we decided we wanted to name this award for her on her behalf. So it's not necessarily the Volunteer of the Year. This award is for someone who wants, who's really making a difference with our mission and helping the environment. And oftentimes that person is putting in a ton of volunteer hours, and we greatly appreciate that. And previous folks who have won it are some of our stewards. These folks are in the audience, except Betty, who sends her regards, and Naui, who's not here right now. And Dee was an advocate who helped us with the field station, dealing with that whole process. City officials, George Darcy is a founding member of the Land Trust, and he was a city councilor who made some changes, zoning changes, and did some really great work regarding land conservation. And Ann Clifford was the former curator of the Payne Estate, and she was an amazing advocate as well. So this year's award goes to Michelle Presenda. She's right over there. So Michelle and Josh joined our group in 2023, and she is currently the conservation director for the town of Lincoln, and before that she had been involved with the Sudbury Valley Trustees and Mass Audubon, and I know she's also been involved with like Lincoln Wildlife and Concord Wildlife and all those other good things. But she said, I'd like to help with your programming and do some bird programs and stuff like that. We're like, yes, please. Mm-hmm. So that's what we started her with. And she did a Zoom and a couple of walks to the Heron Rookery in Weston. Really, really cool. If anyone has ever been there or not been there, you should go. The Sears Land is its official name. You should totally check it out. And we did more walks. Yay! But then she started getting big time involved with Save Waltham Wildlife, and wow, are we grateful for her leadership. She started she at first, as part of her job, had organized Zooms for fellow municipal employees and conservation commissioners about the dangers of rodenticide and why we should not be using it. And then she started doing some research and emailing some Waltham officials about what Waltham was doing and shouldn't be doing. And then we had her come to the Save Waltham Wildlife team, and boom, realized right away, this woman's a born leader. And we are so grateful. So she basically kind of took over and organizes our files and runs our meetings and our Zooms, and she helps guide our plan of attack. And a big part of the lobbying team, and here she is with the Campus Champion Pledge, which Michelle actually drafted. It was like an idea I had in my head, and this is why I love this woman, because she's like, I can put that on a piece of paper and make it work. But it took her a long time, she says, and I'm so grateful because it was awesome. I'm so proud of it. And she has been involved with creating these other materials for a toolkit that other campuses, people who want to make this kind of change on their campuses happen, a whole bunch of things, 7 steps, things that you can do to talk to officials and mobilize, help, and do all these great things. So Michelle is fabulous, and here she is where she was with Emily and with Megan Sullivan at another Brandeis Students for Environmental Action event, getting more folks to sign up. So I think that's that. But I do have, that's my last slide for that one. Good stopping. Ms. Presenda, come on up here. Everybody, let's have another quick round of applause for Stella. Thank you. So Michelle, we are saying we celebrate you as the 2025 Inge Euler Environmentalist of the Year. Thank you so much for leading birding programs for us and being the head of Save Waltham Wildlife. We couldn't have accomplished all that we have without you.
Thank you.
So I think that's it for me, and now I think it's time for our Brandeis professors. This is why it's not moving forward, Dan. So next up are these fabulous Brandeis professors who are going to talk about building climate resilience via collective memory and the oral histories that they gathered at a variety of places, and a little bit with our help we tried to do some outreach, get some folks. I know there's a lot of hardy ponders and probably folks around the river who maybe talk to you. So I think you can come on up. Yeah, I'm not sure. Dan, what's the deal with their slideshow? Is it?
What, you have to bring up your, the slideshow first?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, thank you, yeah, one second.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're multimedia.
Okay, and this is building climate resistance, correct?
Yes, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah, that's us.
Hi.
Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you a little bit tonight. We're really glad to be here. Thank you to Sonia for the invitation, and thank you to the Waltham Land Trust. As Sonia just mentioned, you all have been an important part of this project already. We've had the privilege and the pleasure of doing oral history interviews with many of you. We actually refer folks to the Waltham Land Trust at the end of our interviews as a, if you want to take a next step and be involved in Waltham, here's a great organization. And I want to say, though, this is going to look like a presentation, right? I'm standing up here at a podium and there are slides. This is work in progress, and I'm flagging that for two main reasons. First, we're doing this because we're really eager for your thoughts and your feedback. And second, we are still gathering stories, and you can see over by the round table on this side of the room, we have some of our materials if you'd like to participate in the project in any number of ways, and they're all laid out there. So tonight, we'll give you a little bit of an introduction to our work. We'll talk about the motivations, why we decided to do this. We'll talk a little bit about what exactly we've been doing, our study methods, and we'll share some preliminary findings. We're calling these themes. They're things that have emerged from the project so far. And then we'll show you the website that we've been building. And again, very, very eager for your thoughts and your feedback. This is meant to be a useful project. It's meant to be useful to all of our colleagues here in Waltham. And then we'll have lots of time for questions and again, for your feedback. So I'm Sarah Shostak. I'm the Dean of the School of Social Sciences and Social Policy at Brandeis, where I'm also a professor of sociology and health, science, society, and policy. And I'm joined by 2/3 of our team are here. And maybe I'll just ask you to just stand up quickly and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Sarah Mayorga. I'm a professor of sociology and also chair of the sociology.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel McCain. I'm an assistant professor of sociology.
And I'm Danielle. I'm not a professor yet.
Our colleague Olka Anjaria is overseas right now, so she's not joining us. And Justin Koizumi, you may recognize, is our undergraduate research assistant. And if he looks familiar, it's because he's the co-president of the Brandeis Students for Environmental Action, which has been working so closely with Save Waltham Wildlife. I also want to acknowledge the really generous funding that we received to do this work from Mass Humanities and the Mass Cultural Council. Sarah, you're up next.
Okay, great. So we'll talk today about how we've done our research and what it's found. We want to start with why we're doing this research. At its core, this project is about creating a more resilient and equitable Waltham amidst the realities of climate change in partnership with Waltham residents. I'm a very proud Waltham resident. I live on Plant Road in the Hardy Pond area with my husband and my daughter who loves being a first grader at the dual language school on Lexington Street. So we are very happy to be in community with you all as neighbors. And I've also witnessed firsthand the flooding in Waltham. Every time it rains, there is a very large puddle on my street. I think the road probably needs to be regraded and repaved. I have a sub pump in my basement. I didn't know what that was until I moved to here, just because I grew up in Miami, Florida, where we don't have basements. We have flood insurance on the house, so I'm very familiar with the impact of water as a homeowner and resident of this city. Simultaneously, as a sociologist and a scholar, I've had conversations with colleagues and other stakeholders around climate change in this region that seem mostly focused on coastal climate mitigation. And of course that matters, right? We need to protect East Boston and other coastal communities from erosion and other climate effects. And at the same time, these conversations left me wondering, how is climate adaptation, particularly around water and flooding, given the worsening of both typical and extreme rain events happening in non-coastal locations in the greater Boston area? And so Waltham, I think, is a really great location to answer that question. Waltham is also an interesting site because of its industrial past. As I'm sure everyone knows, Waltham is a formal industrial powerhouse, once home to a diverse range of industries including textile production, machinery manufacturing, metalworking, and of course, watchmaking, right, which is why it's called Watch City. So we are also interested in the question of how past land use could be producing current climate and environmental injustices, in part because the histories of such spaces are rarely made visible and accessible to those who currently call them home. Most areas in Waltham are also state-designated environmental justice communities based on their, that's a designation from the state based on a variety of characteristics, and that includes high concentration of either low-income residents, people of color, or linguistic isolation among residents. And so as sociologists, our team, we all study inequality and access in various forms. We know that the voices of residents are rarely fully harnessed in climate mitigation and adaptation planning, and so we wanted to create a resource that would help residents, city government, and other stakeholders wield the incredible amount of wisdom, experience, and insight that residents have to share. In part because we also know that things like flood maps, for example, don't always accurately represent the lived experiences of local residents. So we're also committed and interested in Waltham because we all work at Brandeis, and even if we don't all live here, Waltham is our professional home, though Danielle and I do live here. As a team, we deeply believe in the responsibility that universities have to their surrounding communities, and we see this as an opportunity to continue to build on these positive, reciprocal, and just relationships between Brandeis and Waltham. So preserving and sharing flood narratives not only creates a lasting and accessible resource, but we also hope it cultivates social cohesion and community solidarity. We want residents to build trust in their own expertise, recognizing that their lived experiences hold insights that are vital to creating effective responses to climate challenges. So to do all this work, my colleagues and I decided to apply for a grant from Mass Humanities, which generously funded our research, and so I'll turn it back over to Sarah to share exactly what we've done in the community. Thank you.
Just press the button? Yep.
Pressing the button.
Maybe you can advance it.
Well, I will advance it.
Can you advance it for me?
Yes, I'm giving that a whirl right now. Okay.
There we go. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So as Sarah mentioned, our goal in doing this project is to lift up the voices of Waltham residents and also to make the stories of Waltham residents available to each other. So our research method had to meet that goal, right? Social scientists ask questions in lots of different ways. Probably many of you have filled out a survey at some point, right? And a survey is a really great way to get standard information from lots of people, but that's not what we were after. What we were after was lived experiences and stories about those experiences. So we've been doing oral history interviews. By oral history we mean we've been recording conversations in which residents, people who work in Waltham, people who own businesses in Waltham, share their experiences of flooding, but also their reflections on neighborhood change and their ideas and experiences of daily life in Waltham. So far, we've collected almost 30 interviews, and as I said, we're still interviewing folks, so if you haven't talked with us yet, we'd love to talk with you. We also, at the same time, that we're doing these oral history interviews, we've also been doing participatory mapping. So if you look over to the side of the room, you'll see a map of Waltham. We had that with us at the Waltham Farmers Market in September, where we had the pleasure of being at a table and just talking with people as they came through about what they've experienced in terms of flooding, where they've experienced flooding, and each pin in that map marks a place where someone told us a story about their experience. These stories are being mapped onto an online map, which Rachel will show you in a moment. And we're also mapping the individual instances of flooding that people tell us about when we're doing this participatory story mapping. We're really interested in thinking together and thinking with you about the overall story that we can tell based on the individual testimonies of residents, the data points that they've suggested about where flooding happens, and also how this compares to official maps like the FEMA flood maps, because one of the things we are finding is that lived experience and this sort of technical knowledge are not always perfectly aligned. And I'm sure that Rachel will say more about that when she shows you the map. But first, Danielle will talk about the themes that have emerged from our interviews so far.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle. I'm the newest member of the team. I just joined over the summer, and so I haven't had the chance to meet many of you yet, but I'm really excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of the Land Trust. So we are still collecting data, but at the same time, we've begun some preliminary analysis of the interviews that we've done so far. I made it work. And it's too early in the process to draw really concrete conclusions or make specific recommendations, but we did want to talk through some of the observations that we've noticed. So these are some of the themes that have emerged from the analysis that we've done so far. So we've mentioned our flood stories, and these are just a couple of examples here. So really the key or driving idea of this project is that stories are a really important form of knowledge, and Waltham residents have lots of stories about the history of their city. So this is captured again in our flood stories, which will be available on our website. You can scroll through and see how these stories are tied to different places of the city. The stories that we've collected so far span the geography of Waltham, but they also stretch over many decades. We've documented instances of flooding that go back as far as the 50s and 60s. So here, again, just a couple examples. So Marie has the story of a torrential rainstorm when she was in kindergarten, and the smallest children at her school had to be carried across Trapello Road by a police officer so they didn't get swept away. Bonnie also tells a story about flooding in Waverly Oaks in, I believe, 2015. When the parking lot was so flooded that she and her coworkers watched a beaver swim across it from their office window. So these are kind of silly. They're a little bit funny. This is kind of common, actually. Some of these stories are quite funny. They're also can be quite upsetting. But this is really the essence of the data. These stories help us sort of understand and make sense of how flooding was experienced by the people who were there, which we can't really get from flood maps. Those maps are not designed to do that. Okay. A common topic of discussion in the interviews connects historical and present day development in Waltham to experiences of flooding. As we know, a lot of Waltham's history is related to the fact that it was an early industrial center. The mills and housing for mill workers are built near the river, or in the case of Hardy Pond, these small cottages were built as vacation homes, and a different part of the same watershed that was mostly wetland. So a lot of building in Waltham has taken place on land that is susceptible to flooding. As Mike says, when you build on wetlands, you get what you get. There's no arguing with Mother Nature. So this historical development continues to have consequences for present day residents of Waltham, and is an important part of this story. But we're also sort of thinking about how decisions that are made today about the trajectory of Waltham's development will continue to have important implications for flooding into the future. Relatedly, given Waltham's history, its infrastructure and its housing stock are both quite old. It's an old city. And the problems that are associated with aging infrastructure tend to be addressed piecemeal and are often reactionary after events have occurred. So there are a lot of examples in our interviews where folks are describing, for example, the outlet structure at Hardy Pond that hasn't been updated in at least 50 years, or street drains that get clogged every time it rains really hard. There are also examples of infrastructure improvement. So folks have described floods that happened in the 80s and 90s in places in Waltham that aren't flooding anymore. So it's not that these improvements aren't happening at all, but something that we're trying to understand a little bit better is sort of the conditions under which these problems are addressed, as this is a real equity concern. So for example, here we have a quote from Charlene. Charlene lives off of Fenton Street in central Waltham, and her street floods basically every time there's a heavy rainstorm, and she has to go out and clear the drains herself. She's called the city often to report it, she says, but she doesn't think that that part of the street has been maintained in the 20 years that she's lived there. And during this interview, she said several times that she wished that people cared about her neighborhood. This was, there's this sense that like this part of the city or the street didn't get the attention that it needed for whatever reason. And so as we continue to process this data, we're really interested in exploring this sort of connection between infrastructure and improvements and equity. So following this, so we see flooding as a systemic and structural problem that rears its head and really sort of sporadically, and it appears as isolated events over time, but they're connected. So addressing these sort of ostensibly isolated events often takes place in ways that are sort of individualized. So like getting a second sump pump or investing in a French drain. So this issue of what do we do about this can also bring up issues of equity as well. So who is in the position to invest in their home in this way? Who owns their home is an important question here. So thinking about these individual solutions, which are effective a lot of the time and important, but they don't address the root causes and sometimes have the potential for leaving the most vulnerable residents behind. Fortunately, there are efforts to mitigate flooding that get out ahead of future problems and are thinking a little bit more collectively. And so we have a couple of examples here. As Mark talked about in his interview, actually a lot of the work that you all do is an example of flood mitigation. The green spaces across Waltham that have been preserved act as sinks for stormwater and may already be playing a really important role in improving the quality of life of Waltham residents, apart from offering really amazing spaces for recreation. So, of course, there's always more to be done. Mike gives some examples here, like using swales and rain gardens as a form of continued stewardship of this land. And these examples are really great because they're both individual and collective solutions, and they can be implemented at lots of different scales. At the same time, interviewees are really clear-eyed about the scale and cost and foresight necessary for flood mitigation efforts like this. As Cam says, it requires a lot of planning and anticipating and addressing problems before they happen, which is a big challenge. So this is where we end on a hopeful note. We have lots of really amazing interviews with you all and with activists across Waltham, and have been really struck by this long history of environmental activism in the city. We've learned a lot about the struggles that activists have faced over the years, the frustrations, as well as some really remarkable successes. So Mark, for example, lays out this story of the dredging project at Hardy Pond, which moved forward, he says, just out of the strength of people's will to get it done. And he discusses how this success sort of set up the possibility of successes in the future. There's sort of the snowball effect that can happen. And Marie talks about having friends comment about how lucky she is to live near such wonderful conservation land. And she says, she replies that luck has nothing to do with it. We fought tooth and nail for that land. Yes, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with that fight. So this isn't part of this slide, but in the next part of this quote, Marie goes on to talk about the use of that space during COVID and how young families and young people and children were spending all of this time in nature that would have not necessarily been accessible to them otherwise. And she sort of alludes to what this might mean for cultivating the future environmentalists of Waltham. So just a really lovely and hopeful way of thinking about this time in our lives that was really quite challenging. So just wanted to also continue that quote. But yeah, so through studying this issue of flooding as it relates to climate change, we've learned a lot about this really robust social infrastructure in the city and how residents have organized over the years to get things done, to take care of each other and the environment, and this has really changed how we're thinking about this work, and we're finding is a really important part of Waltham's heritage as well. So to conclude my little bit, we are hoping that this project will contribute in some small way to these efforts by making the knowledge that you all have as residents more accessible and therefore more actionable. So one of the ways that we're doing this is through a website that Rachel has been building. We're very excited to show you, so I will hand it over to them.
Switching systems here. Oh, okay. Okay. So, like my colleagues were saying, we've been working on this. We've been working on coding this website. It has several features. I'm actually going to start at the About page, which has information about the project that my colleagues have already shared with you, including why Waltham, and just an overview of the project itself. We highlight a little bit more about our methods here that are going into the construction of this website and the map that I'm going to present to you all in a moment. So we've already talked about the oral history interviews and the participatory story mapping, and we're using these in different ways. So with the oral histories, we've been going through them. Actually, Justin and myself, who you've met several times now, funny story, Justin was a first-year student at Brandeis, and I was a first-year professor at Brandeis, and I think he's been in like 4 of my classes at this point, so very proud. And Justin has actually been helping me with some of this as well. So taking a lot of those stories and pinpointing the places in which you all and other residents have talked about where flooding occurs to be able to put them on a map. And then the participatory story mapping as well, so taking those and putting up the map I'm going to demonstrate to you as well. And so we see this as more of a community-created map in comparison to the official FEMA flood maps, which are based on probabilistic hazard models, right? And I think the next step to this process for us is also reading and interpreting these stories that are shared by residents, which maybe I'll give you like a little clip of that, but that process takes much longer than putting these maps together. Sorry, I don't see it on my computer, I only see it up here, that's why it's so awkward. Okay. So this is the map that I've been working on, and so this is just sort of a host website for now. It's not actually live or meant to be used, so I'm still doing some of the back-end coding of this. But eventually it will be, and this whole thing will be a part of the Creative Commons, and so all of the code that goes into creating the website itself will just be free on my GitHub, mostly because I think it's very expensive to create websites, and it's kind of wild how expensive it is, and I thought I should try this myself, because I don't really like to spend money unless it's on native plants. A lot of you have recommended to me, actually, in this audience, so thank you for that. So we have these are the points these are the flood stories that come from the oral histories themselves on this map. And so we have our legends down here that tell us these are sort of collected from the oral histories versus the triangles, which are from that farmers market event, and this map over here that I geocoded onto this website. So we have quite a few Hardy Ponder stories up here as well, and if you click on some of these, it'll pop up with the stories from residents they've shared with us here as well as over here. So lots of stories from Hardy Pond, about the playground, parking lots, lots of folks in this room that are represented on this map as well, so people you might know. And then we've also gotten a lot of stories from Central Waltham as well, quite a few stories about the 2010 flood that happened. A lot of folks had some things to say about this. We got to interview some folks at the Charles River Museum about that flood as well, and see how they've really changed the way that they approach flooding in their building, and how they've built some infrastructure, really simple, small things that were fairly low cost to be able to mitigate the floods. So our little triangles here are, they're from the map over here. And so these are just places that people have reported seeing flooding or told us stories about the farmers market. So a lot of inland places, a lot of places that are in along the Charles as well as Hardy Pond and sort of along these waterways as well, but also places where there's just a lot of heavy infrastructure, including impervious surface, right? Since Waltham was a heavily industrial area, especially in places like the south side and areas like the chemistry and bleachery as well. So there's some other features of this map where I've overlaid some of the FEMA flood categories onto this map as well, so that we can see where those probabilistic models say that there's going to be flooding or there is flooding in Waltham. So the definitions are down here in terms of like high flood risk, so where places are required to have flood insurance, so like Hardy Pond, like Sarah was saying, at her own property. As well. And then a little toggle here, so we have our environmental justice areas defined by the state of Massachusetts. And if I close this thing, we can see here, so these block groups that meet the state criteria related to income, race, ethnicity, or English proficiency. So places where residents may face greater environmental burdens. So I have some big plans for this map of adding a few other things. So I know that on the city, there's maps that are available of just the wetlands in Waltham as well, so I plan on adding this onto the map. But there's definitely room for improvement. It's an ongoing process, so we're really excited to hear some feedback on what you would like to see here as well. We also are going to add some more pages. Right now it's mostly just sort of the map, the team, and about us, some funding, contact information as well. But we're going to add the qualitative analysis on here, including some of those themes that Danielle shared as we continue to explore those more. And perhaps some more overlays of canopy coverage, impervious surface, etc., as we continue to add more to the map. So also, we'd love to add some more information about community partners if they're amenable to direct them to other websites that have a lot more valuable information than we do, like about sustainability initiatives in Waltham. That would be really great. Yeah, so just thank you all so much. Many thanks to Sonia for helping us get started with this project, really, and introducing us to so many incredible folks who have been lovely to meet in the last year and greatly improved my garden, so definitely appreciative of that. And we also have our map over here if you would like to add a pin to it. If there's a place that you've seen flooding over here as well. We also have some postcards if you'd like to write a little story about your flood story and mail it to us. They have stamps on them if you prefer email though. You can also email us as well, and our information is over here as well. So thank you all so much, and we're really looking forward to your feedback and questions for improving this.
I have a question. What's the URL or what's this called?
So it's actually not a live, it's not really
Okay.
a live URL yet. So it's like a staging website. It's password protected right
Yeah.
now, but if I can send you the password information if you'd like to look at it and give us feedback. That would be wonderful.
I think it's really cool. I mean, I don't need it until it's finished. I mean, I understand things take a while till they're ready to be live, but that is super neat. Who else has questions?
Robert, how should we all say first?
I'll come back to
Thank you.
Robert, how about you?
So we mentioned before about how one community took very simple measures to reduce the flooding impact. Can we get more detail about what those measures were?
Can you repeat the question for using the mic, please?
Oh, sure. So you were asking about what communities' simple ways in which mitigating the flooding?
Yeah, like what were those simple methods they used? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of ones that have come up in the interview so far. So I think Mike is a good example. I'm not sure if Mike is here today.
Williams?
No,
I don't know.
but Mike, Mike had a lot of flooding that was going on into his property and ended up taking out his asphalt driveway, for instance, and then put in an entire rain garden in the bottom of his garden. And it was, I went to go see it over the summer and bring him some plants that I'd grown, and it was really beautiful the way that he had done that. It seemed to be really helping some of the flood that was going on into his basement and whatnot. And then there's another story that I think Daniel might have been referencing, which was the peach. There was an issue with a peach tree that was too close to a drain, and it just kept like backing up water on the street for so long, and it was just peaches. And so a couple of folks came together and they kind of made a thing of it of going and clearing the peaches off of the drain. So those are some smaller stories that folks have shared with us.
I want to say that our plan for the Lakeview Preserve is to do some rain gardens and bioswales and things like that, as well as other green infrastructure projects to absorb rainwater and also bad things that might go right into the pond. Otherwise, we want them to be absorbed by the landscape. Channing, I'm sorry, Leo, get you next.
I was curious whether there were newspaper records that you could tap to see what flooding might have happened historically. I don't know how long we've had newspapers and not had newspapers then in Waltham, but that was something that brought to mind.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I did start on this process last year, and what I had done is I did scrape basically all of the newspaper articles that mentioned flood or flooding in the context of Waltham over time, and we started to have some students work on that. But I think in the future, that's something that would be really great to add to this, as well as some of those newspaper articles. Once it's a lot of data, so once I wrangle that all together, to add some of that to this site.
This is working. So I'll say, I'm going to take advantage of a very good question to comment on something I should have mentioned when I was speaking, which is that people have also been incredibly generous with us in sending us photos of their houses, photos of their streets flooding. Some people have sent us videos. So we're building a little bit of our own photo archive. Some folks also have shared with us historical maps of Waltham from their personal collections. So we are trying to pull in those kinds of sources along with the newspaper data as well.
Leo.
The use of the word flooding I'm finding interesting because it's kind of like a weed that's a plant where you don't want it, and a flood is water where you don't want it. And sometimes water is there and then you do something there and you call it, one might call it flooding. But you've mentioned times where there wasn't, and then there's something that we've done that's made it so that it's blocking water from doing what it normally would have done. Okay? And I was just wondering if possibly you could like clarify that concept, even if it's just something as flooding is water where you don't want it.
Oh. Was that a question or a suggestion for defining it on the website? Because that's a really great idea.
Flooding, yeah.
yeah, I really like that idea, and I think that's something that we can add here is really just a definition of that to the website of considering flooding as it really is just water where you don't want it.
Yeah, I think we were looking at each other because we can't say that better than you just did.
Yeah.
I mean, and I will say, you know, people have reached out to us and said, well, I had a foot of water in my basement. Is that flooding? Or every time there's serious rain, my street is covered in water. Is that flooding? So, I mean, just to your point, I think that people are trying to make sense of kind of what counts. And our answer is always like, you know, if you say it's flooding, it's flooding. And we want to learn more about your experience. But I do feel like we're experiencing that ambiguity in our conversations with folks as well.
I'm recalling a project that was supposed to happen behind the embassy garage that had to do, I believe, with flooding and flood mitigation. And I was picturing things like violent swales, is that the right name? And I don't know if that's still in the planning stages. I know there's a lot of things that happen down in that area, but in your infrastructure exploration or whatever the word is, I'm just wondering whether that had come up for future mitigation.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Okay, sorry.
Oh, I think the question was about potential projects behind the embassy.
Embassy garage behind there, that whole lot. I thought something between there and the river itself, which is not very big.
I'm not sure if anyone has talked about that in
And
our
Lisa, do you have something? And
Yes, actually, that was the
like
Chocolate Watershed Association was involved with the city of Waltham in renovating that area so that there was, that the water would go through the new asphalt and there would be plants put in and so forth. I don't know where it stands.
I am going to ask Mayor McCarthy, do you have any idea of the timeline for that? Because that is
It's still
definitely.
gonna be done. Bob told me that there were a few hiccups on it, but it is still gonna be done.
So Bob Wynn is the city
Bob Wynn, the
engineer,
city engineer, yes.
and they're going to be working on it sometime. Other questions? Bill?
I do just want to say that like comments like that are so helpful to us because then we go looking for, you know, who can talk with us more about it. We would love to talk with Bob Wynn about it. You know, we also, you know, have had people when we were at the farmers market say, oh, you know, this street, it frequently floods, and then Danielle so graciously went and talked with business owners on the street, and that was a way of learning more from them. So this sort of, you know, local knowledge is really, really important to us. I appreciate your comment.
Bill?
So I have an observation and an open-ended question about the role of the sociologist, is that the term for your field? That field, how that kind of best works together with other fields of science that map, you know, extensive flooding. You know, for example, the floods that occurred in Texas earlier this year, which were really terrible, fatalities, got a lot of press coverage, and you had some, you know, local people, maybe from one side of the political aisle, saying things like, oh, nobody could have predicted this, you know, nothing like this has ever happened before. And you had people on the other side of the political aisle saying, well, this must be because of climate change, because nothing like this has ever happened before. And it turned out, if you actually heard from like the scientists who had that kind of expertise, neither of those things were true. The flooding like that had occurred before, and it was mapped, and it was within what was predicted to continue occurring with certain frequency. So with examples like that, and just knowing that, you know, our species has short memory with respect to our behaviors and how we interact with the environment. The civil engineer in me is like concerned of like, okay, do we put too much weight on, you know, our own like anecdotal experience versus like quantitative things like maps. But you know, on the other hand, your presentation really convinced me of the value of your approach because it was a lot more interesting than a map, all the stories you collected. And, you know, we've shown as a species we're not good at like, even when there's knowable information like a map, we're not good at seeking out that information and adapting our behavior. So I guess my question after all that is, you know, how do you see your work kind of taking the best of your field in terms of engaging people and making it more interesting without falling into the trap of like overly relying on anecdotes when in fact there is knowable data about where one might expect flooding.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and you know, as sociologists, we take different methodological approaches, and so I primarily do a lot of quantitative research and do a lot of spatial mapping. And my colleagues do a lot of qualitative research and are very well trained in that. And it's a very rigorous and systematic method, just as much as quantitative methods is. And a lot of times, quantitative methods like statistics are actually quite fuzzy. If you like get down to it, not quite the same as like being a civil engineer, for instance. So I think that we look at this as merging a lot of that, right? We only get so much information by putting these theme and probabilistic models like up on the board, right? Because that's what they are. They're probabilistic models. Versus having these stories of where people have like actually seen these things with their own eyes. And perhaps they're anecdotal, but that doesn't mean that they're not real, right? Because they are things that people have observed and seen and have lived through over time, right? And I think that there's something that's valuable to that information as much as using probability to create predictive models for flooding.
We're also hoping that stories can bring people together, right? The focus of this project on making the map public when it's completed. We're also going to be archiving the interviews in a publicly available way. We started chatting with the wonderful archivist at the Waltham Public Library about whether we could archive interviews there as well. And all of this is really meant to be a resource for the residents of Waltham. And our hunch, maybe we're wrong, but our hunch is that stories are a very powerful way for people to understand, become curious about, decide that they care about their neighbors' experiences. And so the qualitative, the stories, the qualitative data are both meant to tell us something about flooding in Waltham, even though, to your point, we know it's not the end-all be-all story of writ large of flooding in Waltham, but they're also meant to give people an opportunity to talk with each other about the current moment and also the collective future that we'd like to create.
That's such a good point. I mean, just even thinking about Mike's story, for instance, of sharing about his rain garden, right, and the creation of that, and how some people don't really know that that's like potentially an option for them to transform the space that they're in every day to make it better. I think it's a conversation that you and I actually had when you recommended some native blue pines to me, if I'm remembering this conversation correctly. We had talked about just sort of those little efforts, right? And the things that we can do.
I'll add quickly one more thing. I think the other great thing about
Use the microphone, please.
Oh, yes.
The other thing about sociology is we're really interested in patterns, right? So even though we only have a couple of quote unquote anecdotes here, part of what we do is a systematic analysis that's looking at how many of these stories kind of come together in similar ways. And I think that's also the power for the residents. I mean, just for myself as a resident, is seeing that the things that you think of as just like an aberration are actually like, oh, actually lots of people have experienced this, or this has been happening since the 50s, or, again, to Sarah's point, to kind of get curious about it. So, but yeah, I really appreciate the question.
Go ahead, Rob.
They can answer first, I already asked.
All right, Eric, let's hear from you first.
Is there, have any of you had any exposure to how any of this information or lived experience may or may not contradict official flood areas as it relates to insurance?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Asking about whether or not the information from the lived experience contradicts flood. As someone who has flood insurance?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I'm curious a little bit more about what's behind the question, like in terms of would it change someone's need to get it, or?
Yeah.
I
mean, if it's not available, usually flood insurance has, I don't have it, so I don't know. But my really, minuscule understanding of it is a federal policy. It's not something that private insurance companies, for-profit insurance companies have anything to do with.
So how does, and the government goes by the maps,
Sure.
I assume.
Yeah.
So if the maps don't say, oh, you don't have to worry about flood insurance, then in your homeowner's policy, it doesn't cover flooding,
Mhm.
because you're not in a flood zone,
Right.
then, but the lived experience of the town or whatever says otherwise, what do you do with that?
Yeah, well, I think that's actually what we are finding, right? Is that,
Yeah.
you know, that there are places in Waltham where people are experiencing flooding, but they're not in a flood area, right? And so I think for us, rather than, I think right now we're trying to figure out how people deal with that. I think for us, the question is more about how people are deciding to react rather than kind of giving a prescriptive, like, this is what should happen. And I think that this is where it's a Waltham story, but I think that's more and more common across the US, right? Where places that used to never flood now are flooding. And I think what's interesting about what we're hearing though in Waltham is that we are having big rain events, but it also, I think, it is an infrastructural issue as well, right? So I think it's both for us trying to tease out like the both and, so we're not just kind of throwing our hands up in the air and saying, well, it's climate change, but also figuring out like where is there actionable, where is it actionable for residents and also government, right? And again, like in partnership for us to make a sustainable, resilient Waltham.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think a lot of my limited understanding of the FEMA flood map, so who's not a hydrologist, is that they're probabilistic models that are based on like the flow of water and waterways, and so a lot of the flooding stories that we've been hearing about are primarily infrastructural that have to do with the industrialization of Waltham, and that hasn't quite been undone over time. And when you have more impervious surface, that's going to lead to the buildup of rainwater, for instance, instead of just overflow from the river or groundwater, perhaps, that comes up living along Hardy Pond. So that's my limited understanding. I'm sure there are other people here who probably have a better understanding of.
Yeah, I'll just say one quick kind of. One piece of data that we're processing is also how we interviewed folks from Waltham Fields Community Farm, and they're telling us that the farm is not flooding, right? And so what is, with these large rain events, like, how is that happening? There's disparities in the cities about places where, you're able to absorb all that water and other places where we're not, and so we're kind of thinking through those ideas, but again, very preliminary kind of stages right now. Yeah, thanks.
2 points. One, I think you need to look at the topography, because Waltham Field is up above, quite a bit above the level of the Beaverbrook. Now, when we moved to Waltham, we tried to get all the insurance on the house. First company we inquired of said, well, you live within a quarter of a mile of a watercourse, you need flooding insurance. Well, we live towards the top of Owl Hill, which is about 100 feet above Beaverbrook. We decided to go to another company. But the whole point is that you need to look at both what man has done, or women as well, let's not be sexist, what humans have done, and what nature has done in terms of the topography. Because in some instances, it's the topography and in conjunction with man-made excavations and architectural things that create the problem.
Yeah, we agree. Yeah, I also don't, I think part of what we're hoping is, I think at the core is also people's understanding. I think for us too, it's, why sociologists care about what we call meaning making or how people understand the world is because that then also shapes action, right? And so I think we hope that our conversations are interdisciplinary, and that it's taking sociology, it's taking climate, it's taking geography, all of these things together to kind of understand the picture rather than seeing just one as the holistic total answer. Yeah, thank you.
So folks, we need to kind of move on. Robert, do you mind asking your question later of the folks? Because you guys are going to hang out for ice cream, I assume. Yes, of course. Good. Great. Awesome questions, great discussion, and fabulous project. Thank you so much for coming. Arms up forward. Yay, thank you. Thank you. And now we're going to the Mass Central Rail Trail
Yep.
update.
Just a second, please.
And I'll be giving this on behalf of Laurel Carpenter. Laurel is the woman who always gives this each year, but she is in Tucson. She's in Arizona enjoying lovely bike rides over there and fabulous hikes. Okay, so across the state, because I'm sure, I hope that a lot of you know that the Mass Central Rail Trail actually goes across, and it may go across the entire state. That's what we are hoping for at one point. So 60 miles of it are open yet, which is really great. It would be headed towards, ideally it will be coming towards Northampton and starting towards Boston, Cambridge. So our 3 miles in Waltham are complete. Or actually 2.5 rather. And you can see here Weston's all done and Whalen's all done. Sudbury's getting there. Great stuff happening in Sudbury. I think a lot of you have seen or heard of the connections that it's making to other trails there in Sudbury. Hudson, getting there. Berlin, not quite started yet. That's the end point. They'll get there eventually. So, but our core segment between Linden and 1265 Main Street, where the Market Basket is open, as is the Linden Street ramp, which is great. Jones Road, which is on the other end by Weston, that access is now open, so you can cross over the active rail to get into Weston and then into Wayland. And so the bridge is still being worked on, though DCR tells us they hope to have it done by the end of the year. There are some issues though, making the trail open east of that, because it's very close to the active rail, the active Fitchburg line, so there's concerns that the MBTA have and DCR about safety. So the bridge might be open, but we're not quite sure about the access beyond that. And then on the other end, going over 128 and 95, that is a really big project, like massive, that is headed up by the Department of Transportation of the Commonwealth. So there have been delays in that, and it has a projected cost of about $80 million. It's a lot. So for the time being, one can still go across on Main Street, and then down Jones Road, and then over the bridge there. So here's the Linden Street ramp that goes up, so you can head west from there. And this is at the other end. We were just talking about Jones Road is on the west end, the west, the very end there. And here you can see what the bridge did look like. And this is the same style bridge as the Linden Street Bridge. They're the same. So it's the same company that did this fabulous project. So it's all done and open. Hooray! And here's Miss Laurel. So she's here. So they're working on the project in Waltham over Linden Street. So it's going to be a great bridge when it's done. I'm loving these murals. This is at the Department of Children and Families building, close towards the 1265 Main Street part. Beautiful. These are native flora and fauna that was painted by Sophie Tuttle. Beautiful. And this is a really cool one too. This is near Hammond Street, Hammond Street, and this is on an industrial building that Gloria and Peter Ryan own, who are a very wonderful, generous couple. And this is really neat because it has the history of the bicycle. And you can kind of see, like, this is in the 2000s, the last one on the end, and that's actually an e-bike that's at that first one. And it's pretty neat. This is the middle of it. David Overseer did that one. Of course, a lot of us are familiar with this station here. This is a historic Waltham Highland station that is the Regans own and operate out of there. And it's super cool because it actually obviously has the rail still there. DCR said, let's keep that in there to remind people, hey, this was actually a railroad. really cool. And we did a walk there in October with the Charles River Museum of Industry and Innovation. And the tall gentleman in the middle with the glasses and standing there, Rick Cofrey, he's the president of the Boston, Maine Railroad Historical Society. So he gave us a guided tour, and I'm sorry that a lot of you guys got shut out on that, because wow, that filled up really quickly. So we're gonna try to get Rick to come back in the spring just for the land trust. So stay tuned on that one. And we really like how there are benches, plenty of benches and bike racks. And these are linear parks. This is very, very important, making connections. So there's a trail counter at Lexington Street near the police station that counts walkers and strollers and everything, and it's amazing because they have, I believe the top is one of the numbers is the daily count, and then the other number is the yearly count. And it blows my mind. When we did that walk, it was like in the afternoon, right, Emily? And when we saw it, it was like 500 people had already been by it by maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was very well used. And of course, it provides access to the Plimpton Elementary School, Fitzgerald, McDevitt Middle School, and Bentley University. And it connects to trails. Eventually, you'll be able to get to the field station once that part east of Linden Street gets open, the Lyman Estate. People can definitely be going there, and we are very excited that Waltham Land Trust hopes to be building a trail connecting the Western Greenway to the Mass Central Rail Trail. We're really working on trying to secure funding, and we've got some permissions from Historic New England to look into that, so we're really excited to make that connection happen hopefully this year. Berry Park is in Prospect Hill Park, and of course the Charles River Pathway. And you can go to Weston and Wayland and Sudbury and all those great places that I mentioned before. And it's very pretty in the fall. So these pictures this is again from Laurel. And we would like to thank Dave Hutchinson here, who is from Weston. And Dave was one of our first Environmentalists of the Year, because this man is amazing. In Weston, he's like every day out there picking up litter and talking to people and just being the best trail ambassador that one could have. So we're grateful to Dave and Emily. And that's it for that. Okay, so what's up next? Oh, the financial results. Dun, dun, dun. And Mark Rudnick is going to join us to talk about that, I believe. Mark, you got something memorized, right? Sorry.
It's the exciting part of the program. I'm sure you all are waiting for.
Thank you.
The mic, please use the mic.
Mike, so I'm setting, you're standing in front of the mic, and you're going to use that to advance. So come here.
I'm happy to report that.
Microphone.
Sorry, thank you. I'm happy to report there have been a couple of nice financial years for the Waltham Land Trust. And that's thanks very largely to people in this room and people like you, who are the mainstay of how we raise money in this organization. On the left-hand side, you can see our performance from the previous fiscal year. On the right-hand side, from the fiscal year that ended this past summer. I just wanted to point out a couple of things here that in grants and capital contributions, we had a really good year 2 years ago and a spectacular this year in raising funds that go directly into the work that we do. In 2024, you can see that we've got a bunch of grants and spent a huge amount of it on program activities. And that was largely to enable us to plan what Sonia's been talking about this evening, which is the intersection of our Western Greenway Trail with the Mass Central Rail Trail at the Lyman Estate, owned by Historic New England. And that project will include building a bridge over Chester Brook connecting together the two portions of the Lyman Estate that are separate right now and allowing hikers and bikers access back and forth between those two trail projects. So we did a nice job spending that money in the previous year. This year we got a couple of big gifts that I'll talk about momentarily, and as you can see, we haven't spent them. And so we were left with a rather large addition to our fund at the end of the year. This is fantastic. A couple of graphs that similarly illustrate the large growth by the size of that circle in the size of our revenues. I think this picture shows you that we have a nicely balanced division of the way that we raise money through our special events, through the generosity of donors, through the membership dues paid by the members, and another chunk coming from grants and other similar instruments. The huge grants that we got in the second year represent why that circle is so much bigger, but as you can see, the proportion of other elements of our fundraising remain the same. On the expense side, you can see here this 48% area there is the money that was expended to do the mapping, surveying, and research needed to proceed with the bridge project at the Lyman Estate. And this year, a much larger year of expenditures, and the big growth was in the payroll area, and that's because the frugality of the previous year enabled us to take a risk and hire a second staff person this year for the first time in the history of the Land Trust. And we've had a couple of people fill that role, and very happily now, Kathy Ordili is our new staff person. And I think that will help us grow this Land Trust over the next couple of years of interesting new projects. So, basically what we did between these two fiscal years is we added some $140,000 to our bank accounts, or to our assets rather, and about 80,000 of that went into the acquisition of the second half of our Lakeview preserve property on the shore of Hardy Pond that occurred in this fiscal year. We got such large and generous gifts in the area of land preservation that we were able to increase our restricted funds down below by about $70,000. So that $134,000 is money waiting in the bank for us to negotiate and carry forward on other land acquisition and land improvement projects. In conclusion, we did get an earmark from Senator Barrett this year of $75,000. As he told us, he has, I think, 8 communities in his senatorial district, so this was a good year for Waltham to receive the generosity of the senator, and we put that right to work buying open space and protecting it on the shore of Hardy Pond. We also received a donation from a longtime friend of the Waltham Land Trust, and with a request that that money go into buying and improving our open space, and that's what we intend to do with that money going forward. These, again, were capital contributions, meaning that they will be investments in our land and not just expenses. So you saw on our balance sheet that suddenly we look a little rich, and eventually we'll turn that into soil and return our money to the earth where it belongs. And so a couple of good years for the Land Trust. I want to thank everyone here for your trust in me as your treasurer. I know you didn't have much choice in that. But happily, my mother taught me a lot about bookkeeping, and so I'll thank her as well. Thank you, Mom. Looking forward to several large building projects that will be put forward by the generosity of our donors, and a robust program made possible by additional staff here, all of which reminds me to ask you to be generous again at the end of the year with your gifts of the land trust, because it is in fact your gifts that enable us to preserve open space in our city. Thank you. And part of my job was to introduce the president of the Waltham Land Trust for many wonderful years now.
Wonderful years.
Dr. Nadine Stein.
That's right. Okay, so this is the most exciting part of the evening because this is the time where it's participatory and you get to vote on new board members. So we have election tonight where we're presenting a slate of 2, 4, 6 people, 3 of whom are currently members, board members, and 3 who are new. So because we don't have, we're conserving paper and we haven't made a huge amount of paper because we don't want to waste it. Sonia's asked me to just read the bios of the new people, but perhaps the current people, if you're here, can just stand up and wave. So John Diekman, I thought I saw John. John is running for re-election, and Anna Richardson, I don't know if Anna's here today.
Anna couldn't make it tonight.
Oh, we missed you, Anna. And Mark Severs, is Mark here?
Mark is not here either.
Oh, all right, no, don't hold that against them when you go to vote. All right, so new people that we'd like to add to our board are Tom Benavides. So Tom, if you want to stand up, I'm going to read your bio. Tom works as an electrical engineer in Waltham. He contributes to a number of community groups with a focus on housing, transportation, and open access to information. Tom's projects include founding Waltham Inclusive Neighborhoods, and I'm sure if you corner him tonight, he'll tell you about upcoming meeting there is, I think, Sunday, right? Creating and maintaining WalthamPolitics.com, organizing for the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization's Housing Justice Campaign, and being a founding member of the Waltham Times. That's cool. So that's Tom, and he stood up and waved, so that's him. And then Barbara Marriott. There's Barbara. Barbara has lived on the island in Waltham for 30 years, and if you don't know what that is, you can ask her during ice cream, and she can tell you where it is. With her husband and 2 daughters. She knows how fortunate she is to live in this special place along the Charles River, now you already know, near DCR wooded areas and the Charles River Trail, and works to protect and preserve it. Barb has been a volunteer land trust steward on the south side of Waltham for several years and has participated nearly every Charles River cleanup for 26 years. Currently retired from working as an art therapist. Congratulations. Barb enjoys spending her time making pottery, taking walks, enjoying art, cooking, tending plants, picking up trash, and getting involved in island business. Barb grew up in upstate New York, and she spent every summer of her youth on a small lake, boating, fishing, swimming, sailing, hiking, exploring, and picking wildflowers and berries. Her love of nature and advocacy for the environment started early, participating in the first Earth Day ever, not to age her or anything, but it was in 1970, and it continues today. So that's another person that we are adding to the slate. And then finally, Megan Sullivan.
Megan couldn't join us tonight, unfortunately, but she sends her kindest regards.
And please don't hold that against her when you vote. A tree hugger from a young age, Megan has always had a love for the outdoors. She spent the last 8 years working in the conservation field, focusing on invasive species and land management, shorebird and songbird monitoring, vegetation surveys, and implementation of the Wetlands Protection Act. She moved to Waltham almost 4 years ago and enjoys exploring its green spaces, usually with her binoculars in hand. So I think at this time I'd like to hear a motion from the floor to, we gonna nominate first, or what do you want to do, Simon?
I move to, board members.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, a lot of seconds in the audience, okay. All in favor? All right, is there any opposition? And is anybody abstaining? So, a unanimous vote. Welcome to new members and welcome back old members. Thank you. So before we go for ice cream, because I think it probably has to be set up and it might take a couple of minutes, we do have some time for questions. If anybody has any questions for, not necessarily for me, but for board members who might be able to actually answer the questions, this is the time. Questions, anybody?
Questions and also suggestions for programs or
Oh,
events?
yeah, we'd love some
If there's something that
suggestions.
you want us to pull together, or maybe more information from these lovely people here about the flooding, give us
This
your
is it,
questions
come
now.
on.
Here we go.
Marie has one. What's your question, Marie?
I just wanted to let you know, that Belmont, is now in the 75% design phase for the MCRT.
So Belmont is in the 75% design phase for the MCRT.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
if you have any questions about that, you can talk to this guy over here, John Diekman, because he has been involved with that for a long time.
Yes, well, just to update that, the 75% design has been submitted to Mass DOT. I think we expect that that's going to be, he's already been through what our review. We expect that to be fairly soon. Not quick to the 100% design, and I think bottom line is next fall, about a year from now, they expect it to go out to bid for construction, and that will get it just under the wire for the funding that's already programmed on the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program. And fingers crossed, still be ambulatory and still.
So
riding a bike on it.
Awesome. And so it sounds like within, perhaps at our next board meeting, our next annual meeting in November, we'll have a report on some movement on this, because it sounds like that will be the time frame.
And then, by the way, that's phase one. That's the eastern.
Phase one.
That's the eastern half. The western half is in the middle of detailed design, underway for a year, maybe pushing 2 years now.
Because
So
it is,
I'm not right in the middle of that anymore. I was on the Community Path Advisory Committee back in the 2012 to 2014. It sort of got the ball rolling. There was an implementation committee and then a project committee. I didn't get appointed.
well, yes, and the situation development, it's more complicated. It's not just like a straight rail like it is in pretty much every single town, so that's why has been a longer journey to get to the end, and I appreciate your being involved with it, John. Others? Come on, don't be shy. Questions, suggestions? Oh, here we go. Sandy.
Question for, on the board members, is that, is the biography description, going to be on your website? Because there are a few details that I'd like to see, the organizations that they also belong to.
Absolutely. Yes, on our website, walthamlandtrust.org, under the About tab, there's a board director's selection that you can pick. And in a couple of days or a week or so, give us a little bit of time, because we've been busy with a lot of things right now, but we will have the full biographies of our new board members up there with links to some of their organizations that they're involved with.
And hopefully a photo.
But we definitely have very charming photos of all of our new people. Other comments, questions? Okay, one last thing from me. Over here where Mark is standing, we have some things for sale. We have Waltham Land Trust t-shirts, the green ones, which you've seen a million times. We have unisex sizes, and we have like large and smaller logos. We also have a female or a style that, slimmer cut that has a wider neck and shorter sleeves. But then we also, so we have Leslie Snedden's book.
Mark doing a great job over there.
Thank you, Vanna. We have a great idea for holiday gift. It's a book describing the plant communities of Prospect Hill Park. And then the very exciting thing, so next to Mark right now, are vintage t-shirts from the Hardy Pond Association. Wow. These predate the Waltham Land Trust. They are amazing. We have a variety of sizes and colors of those. Everything is $20, really easy. You can put the money into Hootie, the donation owl. If you're going to buy a book though, I'd appreciate if you could put it into the manila envelope next to Hootie, because we try to keep things a little separate on our database. And I think we have ice cream, and we have water, and we have like Pringles and Cheez-Its and other yummy things back there. So help yourself and have fun and talk amongst yourselves and us, each other.
Thank you very much for coming tonight.